So I'm actually excited about today's lesson, and I hope you get excited about today's lesson too, because we're going to be talking about Jesus, and we're going to be talking about little children. So you can't go wrong when you talk about Jesus, and you definitely can't go wrong when you talk about cute, adorable kids. Today we get to celebrate those cute, adorable kids. We celebrate the new babies here at Rocketdyne today, and we celebrate children and family as a whole. It seems like every time I get up here, I get the opportunity to reminisce and I talk about the past. I'm always talking about family and what it was like growing up here at Rocketdyne. I hope you don't get tired of that. I hope you don't get tired of me reminiscing, because especially this week, Ty just flat out encouraged it. I loved getting to grow up here at this church with my family. It was a great time back then. You see, I was an 80s baby and a 90s kid. I was a teenager and a high school graduate in the new millennium. The last time I was up here, I discussed how Rocketdyne became a rock for my family, a place of shelter from life's storms. I'm so grateful that I had that with my family and for my family. The relationships that were developed here, the messages of hope in Jesus, and the support from brothers and sisters, many of whom are out in the audience or are live streaming with us at home today. You guys embodied what true Christian community is all about to me and my parents. So to our parents and families who are here today, I'm biased, but I think you're making the right choice by being here. As we get started today, I want you to think about Jesus. And I think we all know how Jesus felt about children. If you look in Matthew chapter 18, it says, "At the time his disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' And Jesus called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, 'Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me.'" This is our verse for the day, and I honestly could just end here right now and say, be like the little children, and you'll be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. But I want to unpack this today, if you'll let me, because Jesus is in Capernaum. His disciples come up and ask, "Who is the greatest? Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And I'm sure they come up not asking the question, but I'm sure they come up because they've been fighting, they've been squabbling, they've been bickering with each other. I'm sure this isn't a question being asked just because they don't know the answer and they want to know the information. To me, it sounds like the type of question you'd ask when you want to be the answer. Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? I mean, it's me, right? Surely I am the greatest. I must be. And if not me, well, then who? Who, Jesus? Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And I love how Jesus responds. There's a child nearby, and he calls the child over. I picture him scooping him up in his arms, and he says, "This child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Because if you don't change your ways, if you don't become like this child, if you don't humble yourself, you will never be great. You must act like this child. Jesus goes on, and we see in verse 5, as Jesus hasn't forgotten, he just made this statement. He says, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me." Wow. But Jesus warns, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and drown in the depths of the sea. I don't think that's what the crowds were expecting to hear from Jesus that day, especially his disciples. I mean, his disciples gave up everything to follow him. And Jesus says you need to humble yourself and be like this child. Jesus continues to preach, and he doesn't forget about what he just shared about children. We see in verse 10, he says, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, one of these children, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven." That was not the last time Jesus made the point about how he felt about kids. Jesus, in the very next chapter, in Matthew 19, he went back to Galilee. Large crowds were following him. Some Pharisees come up and they're trying to trick him. And Jesus, as he always does, put the Pharisees in his place. He was not tricked. And then I see he's needing some peace. So he goes and he finds the kids and he plays with the children. In verse 13, then the children were brought to Jesus, that he may lay hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked the people. But Jesus said, "Let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven." Again, Jesus loves little children, but he values children. Now, if you're listening and you aren't a kid person, that's okay. This isn't the invitation, but just go ahead and come on forward. We'll pray for you because our model in Jesus, the model of how to live a perfect life, didn't just recognize the children, but he was present with them and around them. He didn't just be around them. He made an effort to be a part of their lives. And our church here has always loved children. I mean, they have gone the distance many times. VBS, Jumpstart, our Bible classes. Our Bible classes here in the 90s were quite legit, if I'm just going to be honest with you. One of the first classes I remember when we came here was taught by Barbie Cope. She was teaching us about when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. We were getting ready to talk about the Passover, so she had us take lamb's blood. I actually think it was just red paint, but she had us take lamb's blood and paint and mark outside of our doorposts, outside of the door frame of our classroom. That way, the angel of the Lord would pass by. As a firstborn child, I was very thankful for that lesson, and it really stuck with me that the angel of death would pass by and not take me out as the firstborn. But it didn't just stop there. She made a Passover feast for us in that little classroom of hers. I assume we were eating actual lamb, something I hadn't tasted before. I remember the herbs and the spices, the smell of the fresh bread. She had oil to dip the bread in. That's biblical. It was nothing short of impressive. And that was all in one single Sunday morning class. We had similar experiences like that. Later on Wednesday nights, the Bible class, it became fully immersive. One season, the classroom that's now Imagination Station went under the sea. And when we walked down the long hallway going towards it, you found yourself with fish swimming with you along the walls. Some were up in the air floating with you. The regular fluorescent lights had been turned blue because now we're under the water. There were porthole windows in the classroom where you could see what was going on around you because we're under the sea and we can see what's going on in the seabed. You saw fish or scuba divers. I think at one point we dressed up like pirates. We learned about stories in the Bible that involved water. Jesus walking on top of the water. At one point, we got swallowed by a whale and we met Jonah. I still remember it smelled like fish inside this black plastic tarp that was a whale. But it smelled like fish because they had opened a can of tuna and put it in front of the fan that inflated the whale. The next fall, that same classroom space was completely transformed, and we found ourselves in the Wild West, and we learned about the Israelites wandering in the desert, about Elijah being fed by the ravens when there was a drought. Somewhere I have a picture of my 3rd or 4th grade self wearing a cowboy hat and bandana for the Wild West adventures. I couldn't find it because I can never seem to find the photos I really want to. It was just a wonderful time. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. I'm thankful for the people who gave me that opportunity. My parents for attending and making sure I was at class. My teachers for having imagination and dreaming up those terrific types of lessons to learn about the Bible and to learn more about Jesus. This was my experience, but I'm sure others of you have had similar experiences, right? Either here at Rocketdyne or wherever you grew up. Clearly, you grew in the Lord because someone was willing to teach you. Do you remember those people? Was it a grandparent, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a family member? Maybe it was a Bible class teacher. But someone cared enough about you to teach you the Word of God. A few months back ago, Jen and I had the chance to teach an imagination station. I was prepping for another lesson and reminiscing and coming off of all these stories and thinking about what it was like to grow up back then. So I got really excited when we found out that our lesson was about the Red Sea and the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, fleeing from the Egyptians. I wanted to make an experience like the ones I had grown up with. Let's just say my dreams were a lot bigger than Jen's, and I kept trying to figure out a way we could assemble walls of water on 2 sides and safely get little kids across. I wanted to bring in sand, water, lots of fans, because the big wind blew and separated the waters. I even had a plan to bring back that can of tuna fish, for the smell, because who knows what the Red Sea smells like, but we needed it to smell immersive. I had this dream, and I wanted to give the kids an experience they wouldn't forget. But luckily for me, Jen's more realistic, and usually, as the case, is better prepared. We parted the Red Sea, all right, but it was just 2 blue plastic tablecloths. We got those Israelites to cross the Red Sea before the Egyptians could chase them down. And as the Egyptians entered, we tossed those tablecloths over the kids. Then we'd all switch, and everyone would have a turn to either be an Israelite or be an Egyptian. For me, it was one of my most enjoyable times teaching Imagination Station, and I think the kids loved it. Because you see, you can't go wrong telling kids or others about these stories in the Bible. You can't go wrong telling others your stories that you have with Jesus. Parents, families, as we focus on our shared story this year, how God has shaped the past is currently shaping our future. We have a big job to live up to. And it can be and is so intimidating. But the message is very clear. In Proverbs, we know, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, he will not depart from it. And these stories continue to be told. We know that from Psalms, that the generation to come might know, even the children yet to be born, that they may arise and tell them to their children. In Ephesians, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. Again, a huge undertaking, but one that is so rewarding. its value cannot be measured, not even in just one lifetime, but in the lifetimes of those who came before us, who loved us and taught us, and of the ones that will come after. Our nieces, our nephews, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. I again am so thankful for those who were willing to pour into me, those who loved me enough to share the good news, those who knew the stories and they just let their imagination run wild, those who created experiences and let us all who were present join in and become a part of it. I'm so glad they did, because here it is, 25 years later, and I'm still telling you about it. And I'm desperately wanting that for my children, and for your children to have memories like that as well. You can be one of those people, and frankly, we're called to be those people that share this story. So again, to our Bible class teachers, to our nursery helpers, to those who help with Kids Connection, Next Gen, any of our youth programs, Imagination Station, VBS, or Jumpstart, thank you. Thank you, parents, for bringing your kids to church, especially on cold days like this. Thank you, grandparents, for setting an example, because your work's not done. And to my Bible class teachers who are here today, Jerry Davis, Beverly, Sharon Sanney, Carl Tomlinson, Barbie Cope, Brenda Baker, Kathy Reynolds, Susan Jones, my own mom and dad, thank you for following Jesus' example and teaching me. Look around today, church. Look around and find that child or those children you love, those children you care about, and show them Jesus. If you're here today and you're not yet a follower, but you're ready to follow Jesus, if you're ready to imagine and dream and experience something that we can't even fully comprehend,